Hi, Charlie, Mr. Kratovil. Thank you for having me here. I guess I just want to start off by asking you, how do you feel your personal and professional experiences qualify you best to represent the people of New Brunswick?
Thanks so much, John. And first of all, thank you for coming here. Thanks for being so kind and supportive with what you've said about the campaign, and thanks for the coverage that you do. We need more independent journalists out there covering important issues. And I've been an independent journalist myself for the past 15 years, and so that's one of the things that does qualify me for the role of mayor of New Brunswick. In my work here, I've investigated a lot of really interesting and important corruption stories. And I've also learned about a lot of the good things that are going on in New Brunswick. The best part of the job has been working with over 200 reporters over the years, helping them build their skills and watch them move on to bigger and better things, and really learn how to manage an organization. Right, New Brunswick today is sort of going against the tide. Journalism is a field where it's really tough to make it work, to make it sustainable, and to make an impact. Yet we've continued to grow and have, an even bigger impact each year that we've been doing the work. I'm also an activist and an organizer, so I've been working with nonprofit organizations basically since I got out of college, fighting for a sustainable future, clean water, healthy food, a livable climate future. So basically all the major issues that are affecting our environment and our health. So I've learned a lot about activism and organizing. I've also gotten to travel around the state and see how different towns do different things, and see how some towns have a better approach to protecting our resources, and also just a better approach to listening to their residents. So I want to bring all that knowledge and experience to City Hall, and I'll continue to be an activist and advocate for policies that will benefit the residents in New Jersey, and I'll continue to be an investigator and look into the things that aren't working out well and see how we can improve them.
Okay, great. Now, this was going to be one of my last questions if we had time, but you kind of tied into it. So why do you think journalism is so important, and in what ways in New Brunswick, New Jersey as a whole, and at the federal level, is journalism under attack, and why should the regular working class New Brunswickian, New Jerseyan, and American care, and what should they do to assure a free press?
Yeah, journalism is one of the only jobs that's actually in the Constitution. The freedom of the press is right there in the First Amendment, protected, so that anybody who wants to exercise those rights can. And, the great thing about a free press is that it can be like what you're doing today, asking questions of somebody who wants to run for office, but it can also be something like holding police accountable when you come across a crime scene, or these federal agents with ICE, often violating our Constitution. Because of the freedom of the press, you have the right to take out your phone, you have the right to record them, you have the right to ask questions, and so that's critical, as you could imagine, to accountability, to transparency, and all these values that we hold dear. So, I think that, especially in a place like New Jersey, where we have, lots and lots of decision makers, lots and lots of important, high stakes, big money, controversial decisions that get made on a daily basis, having more reporters watching, asking questions, reporting, and sharing out what they're learning is critical towards just having an informed population. So that's one reason we started New Brunswick Today, is we saw a void. We saw the traditional media kind of slowing down and not reporting as much on our city. So we created a space for regular people to step up, step into action, and use our press freedoms, our rights, to educate the community about issues that matter to us. So, it's even more important today than it was when we started, and that's why I'm grateful for the work you do, and continue to be pleased to see others like you step up.
Well, you're too kind. I appreciate that. But since we're limited on time and I have far too many questions, I appreciate that answer. How long has the current mayor been in power, and why do you feel that is a problem?
Yeah, so my opponent, Mayor Jim Cahill's been in office since 1991.
Oof.
And and before that, he was in City Hall as a assistant city attorney. His cousin was the mayor before him, so between the two of them, they've controlled City Hall since 1978. And
Excuse me, I don't mean to cut you off.
1979, I should say. Yeah.
Wasn't his cousin indicted or brought up on charges?
His cousin did plead guilty to federal crimes and did some time in prison. Was one of the most powerful politicians in New Jersey, State Senator John Lynch. And then, yeah, he kind of handed off the reins of the city government to Mayor Cahill in 1991. And I do think that's a problem because right now we're in a moment where we need fresh ideas. We need new people, the next generation to step up and step in. And we've had the same mayor for 35 years. So the approach to governing is still stuck in the 90s in many ways. We're still doing car-centric developments like these big parking decks. The mayor doesn't have an email address where the public can actually communicate with him via this sort of like very, it's almost like not even considered like, modern technology. Email's been around a long time, but you can't email the mayor directly. So like, we need a new approach. We need new leaders. And if I had my druthers, I'd say we should have a term limit. And I will advocate for and abide by a 2-term limit. So you won't catch me running for a 3rd term here in New Brunswick because I think it's just in the best interest of residents to have turnover in that office, to have new leadership, every so often. And 35 years is too long.
What concrete measures do you plan to take, assuming you win the election, as mayor of New Brunswick, in order to truly deliver for the people of New Brunswick on your first day, in your first month, and in your first 100 days?
Thanks, John. It's a tough question because there's so much to be done. And the reality is we have a real problem with people's basic needs not being met. So, anybody who lives here knows that we have hundreds of people that have no home at all, no place to go, no safe place to rest their head, keep their belongings. We need to address that right away. So the first thing I want to do is focus on getting a center where people can go to get their basic needs met. That means shelter, that means food, that means medical care. So I want to get that up and running as a stopgap while the city pursues building emergency housing to get folks off the streets and get the key to their own place, because that's really the solution. Housing first is the way to go, but that takes time. So in the meantime, we want to have a sort of a center. Right now, there's obviously state laws that require them to open up a space overnight on the coldest nights. So for the most extreme cold nights, you get a few hours notice that you're going to have a place to stay, and if you get there early enough, you can get one of the 40 beds we have in our Code Blue warming center. But that's not good enough. We need every night, overnight, and we need to pair that with services like healthcare. Getting people, whether it's mental health care or physical health care, with also just getting people food and sustenance to sustain as we work to get permanent housing created for them.
I love that. Now, what are you trying to accomplish? Let's skip the month, as that's a little much. But what are you looking at to try to accomplish in your first 100 days?
Yeah, I'm really focused on transformative change in the transportation field, and also the financial and political spheres too. So one way that we can achieve that is by abolishing our parking authority. The parking authority has been a real kind of like epicenter of the corruption here. They've had multiple theft scandals. They've had real estate boondoggles that have cost the ratepayers money, and they continue to push this agenda that serves corporate interests and out-of-towners as opposed to the actual residents. So we still have a parking problem. They haven't solved it, but they keep building these giant parking decks. And, I want to end that approach. I want to abolish the parking authority, create a transportation department. It might sound like a far-fetched idea, but Jersey City abolished their parking authority. It worked out well. They saved $1 million a year by doing that. And I think we can do the same thing here in New Brunswick. Believe it or not, we have the largest parking authority in the state of New Jersey, even though we're a city of just 55,000. So I want to cut the waste, fraud, and abuse out of the situation, and have a 21st century approach to transportation. I think the city government, the mayor and council, should supervise all transportation, including parking. And that means we can use those resources to deliver services that will benefit everyone, including people without cars. So I want to get us free public buses that will connect our neighborhoods, connect people to job opportunities, connect kids to recreational opportunities, after school programs, and also get us some protected bike lanes so people who like to ride a bike can do it safely. Focus on our most dangerous intersections and our roads that are the most in need of repair. Get those potholes paved, get those intersections to be safer for everybody, motorists and pedestrians, and use that transportation department to really move us forward. So that's kind of the vision I have. It's a big vision, but we can do it with the people behind us, and I'm really looking forward to abolishing the parking authority and establishing that transportation department.
Awesome. All right, great. So Charlie, tell me, what is your campaign power? What is your campaign banner, Power to the People, all about?
Yeah, here in New Brunswick, the people have felt disempowered. I can say that firsthand because I talk to a lot of people in the community, and there's a sense of hopelessness. There's a sense that, we can't make change here, that, the machine's too powerful. But the truth is, we have power if we all work in the same direction, like how we work together to stop that big data center that they were trying to build here. So, we came up with the name Power to the People. It's something that, throughout history has been a slogan that people have used to unite and empower one another. And I think that here in New Brunswick, we can do that if we come up with an agenda that everybody backs. So that's what we're trying to do, is unite the people and give them the power. Right now, we feel like the power's in the hands of a few people. We want to give it to all the people.
Well, since you referenced it, I'm going to skip another question and say, I saw you on Breaking Points.
Sure.
One of the most successful independent media organizations for viewership and subscribers in the nation.
Oh, yeah.
No small undertaking, right? I was saying, to the degree, I'm not 100% sure because you can't always look these things up, but I'm in touch with people in different areas, and it seems that people are studying your pretty miraculous, even whether you agree or not, and I think most people do agree, but your 9-day organizing campaign to shut down a data center it was in New Brunswick, correct?
Yes, on Jersey Ave.
Now, the reason I ask you this is because I think that whether it be a union organizer, a community activist, an academic, or just a regular Joe or Jane, looking that are outraged by the power usage, the use of water, and also the surveillance factor of what a lot of these are really for. Could you explain to people what you did and why you and the people that eventually joined you were successful?
Yeah, so, I'm really lucky to be in a position where I am a community organizer for a living. I work with a great organization, Food and Water Watch, and we're one of the leading organizations opposing this push for large AI data centers around the country. So we got out in front of the issue. We've called for a nationwide moratorium. And, I really didn't understand the power of this issue until I went to a meeting in East Windsor and saw how upset people were when their mayor and council were proposing a redevelopment plan that would have allowed for a data center on a road called Probasco Road in that town. And I saw how many people, and I know how hard it is to get people to come out to their local government meetings. I saw, about 100 people coming out and forcefully coming out against this. And I said, okay, well, this is an issue that has a lot of power in it, but also, they're never going to do one in New Brunswick. New Brunswick's an urban area. We don't have a lot of free land to do this kind of thing. So I was shocked when I was at the planning board in February and I heard them lay out this developer's idea to make a 27,000 square foot data center on Jersey Avenue and basically do that instead of what they had promised originally would have been a park, a park that would have been open to the public. And I said, wow, I can't believe they're doing this. But I was in a position where I knew all the right people to call. I obviously have built a network here over the 22 years I've been living in town. But I also knew the organizations that are with us on this issue. And so we were able to build a strong and diverse coalition in a very short time. I knocked on all the doors in the surrounding neighborhood and got the word out to community leaders. And everybody was uniformly against it. Nobody really wanted this thing, and so we were able to have a massive turnout at the City Hall meeting. We were able to generate hundreds of emails to our council members from people who actually live in New Brunswick and didn't want to see this happen. And we were ultimately able to get a lot of media attention on the victory because it was such a kind of like epic win for the people. And that's how I ended up on Breaking Points and ended up getting a lot of accolades. But it was just 9 days from the day that we found out until the day that we defeated it. So it was a pretty wild 9 days. But I knew that it was an issue worth fighting on because I wanted to make sure our city council knew not just that they shouldn't move ahead with this project, but when somebody else comes along and proposes a data center, I wanted them to remember how against it the people were. So we really, kind of ran up the score, and we got 200 plus people to show up at that council meeting. And I venture to say they will remember that.
If last I checked, 6.6 million, I think it was retweets or whatever you call it now on X or formerly Twitter.
On social media. Yeah, it went viral. It was wild.
And why do you think it went viral? Without, you kind of indicated some of this in your response, but why do you think, briefly, it was so popular?
Yeah, so there were a couple things. I think the big thing was just actually that our city hall is kind of small, so we were not able to all fit in the room. In fact, the city kind of went overboard and restricted access to just a handful of people. Really, they said, we're only allowing 80 people in the building, and they reserved spaces for all their insiders and made the public wait out in the cold and the rain. But fortunately, they kept their energy up. They were marching and chanting, and we could hear them in the room chanting, vote no, vote no. And when the news of what happened on the inside of the building reached the outside of the building, there was just this moment of elation and joy that went viral just because it was a great moment. And then I think a lot of people were probably searching for New Brunswick Data Center and trying to figure out how did this fight come about and who was leading this fight. And, folks came across my tweet where I celebrated the win and pointed out that not only did we defeat the data center, but we got them to reinstate the requirement to put the park in. And that just kind of took off. So I think it was just a function of the city being overzealous with their restrictive attitude towards access to the building, creating that viral moment, and the fact that the folks at the Climate Revolution Action Network were smart to get that on video and put that video out right away, and it just sort of like took off from there.
I think that you missed one point that I was trying to get at, which that was a great answer. Yeah. I'm just saying, and very relevant. Do you think it's possibly also extremely popular because the vast majority of people all across the country are against these data centers?
Of course. Sort of goes without saying, that the people are very fired up about this issue for a variety of reasons. Like you mentioned, some people are concerned about the water, some people are concerned about the electricity bills, some people are concerned about the noise pollution. Other people are concerned about the impacts of AI on our economy, on jobs, on misinformation, on surveillance. So lots of different people across the political spectrum are united that these are bad. And so definitely people want to see a win on this sort of big fight against big corporate, big tech, big data.
Absolutely. We're seeing, as an example, Trump majority districts all over the country that are outraged about the data centers. But I digress since we're limited on time. I noticed something unique about your campaign. You and the New Jersey 6th Congressional District 2026 primary challenger candidate, John Hsu, are cross-endorsing each other. Can you tell me how that came to pass and if that was a difficult decision?
Oh, that was an easy decision for sure. John's a good friend. We've worked together for many years in organizing, and I am very grateful to him because one thing we were able to do was stop plans for a gas power plant in the district just a few miles outside of New Brunswick. So they wanted to build a huge gas power plant right on the Raritan in the Caseby section of Woodbridge. And from the very beginning, John was with us in that fight. He helped get his town, Edison, New Jersey, to be the first town to oppose the project. It would have been right on the border, basically, with Edison. And so many long nights at the Edison Township Council with him working to get that resolution passed. And he continued to lead and help organize and get other towns against it. So, John is just a great community leader. And, he's actually, just sort of doing it as a volunteer, right? Like I actually have a day job where I organize and I get a salary to do it. John does it, for no pay, right? So he's somebody who's a real strong community leader who we need organizers in Congress, right? We don't need more lawyers and business people and sort of career politicians. We need people who actually understand activism and organizing and how to work on issues and win. And John's that kind of guy. So happy to endorse him and grateful that he returned the endorsement and is supporting me.
Absolutely. I actually was at that event and met John for the first time after said event. They had something going on at somebody's house in New Brunswick. He offered me a ride. He insisted to make sure I was okay to get to the train station. And I will, for some air of impartiality, we'll leave it at that. But everybody I have spoken to, and this is not a bias, this is just a fact, has given high regard to both you and Charlie. And I think that, people should really consider you, amongst the other candidates, but genuinely consider you, and look into your records. And to that point, before we get to,
Sure.
We've got a few more minutes, when is the last day to register to vote for those who are unregistered, and when is the last day to vote?
Thanks for
the
asking,
primary,
John. Yeah, important questions, because unfortunately New Jersey does not have same-day voter registration. If you want to vote in this primary, you've got to register by May 12th. So just a few more days to go until Tuesday, May 12th. You got to register. Fortunately, you can do it online. Just type in Charlie4Change, the number 4.com/VR for voter registration. It'll take you to the state website, and you can accomplish it there. But you have to get it done at least 3 weeks before Election Day. So the Election Day is June 2nd. We do have an early voting opportunity, so you can vote by mail, or you can show up at an early voting location, including the one here in New Brunswick at the Hub Teen Center, starting May 26th through May 31st. So you can vote any one of those days on a voting machine at the Hub Teen Center, or you can show up on the big day, June 2nd, at your usual polling place.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And let me ask you a question, and this is a difficult one, but I think it's important to these issues. Now, we have people that are independents, were formerly Democrats, or at least registered as Democrats to vote in primaries. And there is, in my view, a significant amount of propaganda from both parties to tell people that voting doesn't matter. Now, as I understand, if you want to change things, voting itself is not the only key to that change.
Yes.
But why is it important to understand? For instance, you ran as an independent candidate, I believe, the last election.
Yeah.
Now, I have studied political science and labor studies at the master's level. I do understand why, but briefly, why is it important at this time in the 2026 midterms, right? Meaning nationally, but also local elections, to be strategic with your vote. And if the best candidate happens to be a Democrat, why should you register? Keeping in mind that the next day, or the same day if you want, you could register as an independent, a Green Party, a socialist, a Republican, or anything else. Why should people understand that just because you registered as a Democrat to vote in one or two primaries does not mean you are you agree with the leadership of the Democratic Party?
Yeah, great question, because I know a lot of people get wrapped up in these labels and sort of like the national debate over the two-party system. Listen, the two-party system sucks. The only thing worse than that is the one-party system. That's what we have in New Brunswick. We almost always end up with only one choice on the ballot in the general election, and often we only have one choice on the ballot in the primary election. So the way it works in New Jersey, as a candidate, you have to choose one path. You can't run in the primary and then if you lose, run again in the general as a third party or independent. You have to pick one or the other. The first two times I ran as an independent, and I was proud to do that. I do think that there's value in running in the November general election when any voter can cast a vote, and that includes our Rutgers University student community, who's way more likely to participate in a November election than a June election. But in this moment, where we, after many years of advocacy finally have defeated this corrupt county line ballot design system, and now we have a much more fair ballot in the primary than we do in the general. And we also have new energy in the Democratic Party. Candidates like Zoran Mamdani, Ana Lilia Mejia, winning big. I think that, people are starting to wake up in the Democratic Party. Obviously, like, losing the presidency to Donald Trump for a second time is something that has been a wake-up call to a lot of people, and they're starting to say, maybe we shouldn't just keep electing the same old. Maybe we do actually need a new vision, new candidates, and a new approach. And so I'm hopeful that Democratic voters will support me, but I'm also hopeful that the people you talk about, unaffiliated voters who haven't picked a party yet, have stayed out of primaries, that they'll show up for June 2nd. And I want them to know that you have a right to vote in the primary. If you are unaffiliated, you can show up on June 2nd. They will ask you which primary you want to vote in, and you can say Democratic. You can cast your vote in this primary. I hope it's for me. And then you can do what you will from there. You could change to a different party or change back to being unaffiliated if you don't like being in a party. But it's so important that we use our votes. I show up for every election, school board, primary, general, special election, because I want candidates to want my vote. I want them to know that Charlie from Saddam Street always shows up, because as a candidate, I know that makes you more likely. People are going to be more likely to care what you think about if you show up and vote. So I show up and vote every election. I hope folks will make a choice to specifically show up and vote in the Democratic primary, because that's where we've got some real good choices, including at the top of the ticket for Congress.
Now, the only other thing I want to add is that can you briefly touch on why the way the two-party system limits independents and third-party candidates, including the fact that what we're discussing to the layman might be confusing. The reason they even have to register as a Democrat is because we have a closed primary system, right? And then the other thing is that you get, even if it's limited because you're a challenger, it's like a decent amount of information on voters in the database from the Democrats if you run in the party. Without that, it's a very large challenge to whip up votes and know who to target, correct?
Yeah, well, I'll be honest, the machine, I'll call them, the Democratic Party establishment, hasn't done anything for me. They haven't given me anything, and I'm not expecting them to. They have their candidate. I'm here to represent the people. But in terms of, like, why the two-party system, I mean, we know, right? They would rather support each other than other third-party ideas or outsiders. And so, when I've run as an independent, I was in column I on the ballot and column F on the ballot. So you had your two columns, A and B, for the big, two machines. And then you had me way off to the side. And literally, I didn't even realize how hard it made it for people to vote for you. I sort of said, there's a ballot. They can find me on the ballot. But when you got in the voting booth in 2018, you had to turn your head all the way to the right to find me way off to the side. So just by virtue of the way they control the ballot design, the two parties are putting themselves in those first spots where they have the greatest likelihood of getting the votes, and they run with a big team and big money, and they control a lot of the apparatus, right? So it's very hard as a third party candidate, but more power to people who are running outside the system. I think one solution that we should get behind is ranked choice voting, because ranked choice voting enables people to have more of a voice, and it also changes the dynamics for candidates. So you see, New York City had a ranked choice primary, and you had a lot of cooperation between candidates and unity between candidates, and we saw an outcome that was really transformative, right? With Zoran Mamdani winning the primary, defeating the former governor. And then we had a general election without ranked choice voting in New York, and you had candidates allegedly trying to buy each other off to drop out of the race and all sorts of, nasty allegations and stuff. It changes the dynamic in a positive way to have ranked choice voting, because it creates a dynamic where people want to unify, and it also gives the voter more of a voice. So instead of just having to pick one candidate who, should you give your vote to the candidate that's more of a long shot that you're not behind, or the candidate who, you think you don't really like that much, but you like him better than the worst guy. It eliminates that dynamic. It lets you have more of a voice by saying, this is my first choice. I like this guy the best, but if he doesn't win, I want my vote to still count for this guy. And so ranked choice voting is a really great solution to the problems of the two-party system. And we're actually seeing a lot more support for it. So I hope New Jersey will get behind that in future elections, and we'll be able to have that.
Tell me quickly about the 2012 referendum regarding the school board members and your involvement in that effort and why it matters.
Sure. So for 102 years, we had no school board elections. The mayor got to pick the school board. The outcomes were terrible. We had a really low graduation rate. People were fed up with the mayor's appointed board. And so we organized. I was just one of many people who helped out on the campaign, but basically just a few days after Hurricane Sandy devastated Central Jersey, we had a vote the same day that President Obama won re-election, and a narrow majority, just about 100 people, would made the difference.
I think I saw 98, if I remember
correctly.
correctly.
Something like
Very
that.
close. No,
it was a super close election, and we won. And it was actually the fifth try. Believe it or not, there were 4 other referenda to switch away from the appointed board and start having school elections. And 4 times prior, the question was defeated. More people voted no and wanted to keep the mayor in charge of the schools. But on that 5th try in 2012, we won. And now we have a directly elected school board, 9 members. Basically, every year there's 3 that are up for election. And the mayor has less control over the schools. They behave a little bit better, and we have a better dynamic where at least we get some say in who is serving.
Okay, great. And I know we're running out of time, but I just have a couple quick, very important questions, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
According to Zateo, Rami El-Gandor, who was set to deliver a commencement speech at the Rutgers School of Engineering graduate ceremony, out of nowhere, he was told his speech was being canceled due to an undefined small number of students complaining about his social media posts. A Rutgers alum, biotech CEO, and executive producer of The Voice of Hind Rajab, El-Gandor explains that his humanitarian stances were no mystery, and in fact, the school has championed those perspectives in the past until now. As a Rutgers alum yourself, How does this make you feel, and was this the right or wrong decision, and why?
It's disgraceful, honestly. I really think, based on the limited information I have, this is someone who is widely regarded. Obviously the university thought so. The Board of Governors picked him to be the commencement speaker and spoke very highly of him when they did that. So I don't understand what's changed. As he mentioned, his stances were known, and I haven't seen anything that was disqualifying in the media coverage I've seen. And I think it's really unfortunate because at a university of all places, you're supposed to value advocacy and free speech, and his expertise is in the technology field, but he's allowed to have opinions about other things too, and certainly. I think it's really appalling that the board would back off of having any commencement speaker. I think their plan is to just not have one. And I actually think back to my time at in connection with the student movement when Condoleezza Rice was going to be the commencement speaker, and we had a huge movement that stopped that from happening. Talking about daily protests and large mass mobilizations. It sounds like this is just a few people sent some emails and said, we don't like this guy, we might not go to commencement. And the university buckled under a very, sort of like small time opposition campaign, not the massive views of the people.
Okay, tell me quickly about your city council running mate, Yenny Mendez-Romero.
Yes, I'm really blessed to be running alongside Yenny. She's a small business owner. She's a mom. She grew up here, was actually born in Mexico, but moved here when she was just like a young kid. And she chose to stick around New Brunswick. She really wants New Brunswick to be better. And she is, as an insurance professional, helping out lots of small businesses and homeowners and other people in town, and really serving her community. She is Mexican American, and if elected would be the first Mexican American on our city council. So I'm really proud to be running alongside her. And just as I make the rounds of the community, I run into so many people that are like, oh, Yenny, I know Yenny, she's great. She's really well known and well liked in the community, and I'm really lucky to have her on our team.
Fantastic. Now, I don't want to, this is an important issue, and it is a little change of tone, but really quickly, I'd be I believe I even reshared something that you shared about an upcoming event. I believe it's tomorrow. Or tell me who Deborah Terrell was and how you first learned about the situation that ended her life.
Yeah, this was a really horrible situation. Was a resident of New Brunswick for almost all of her life. She grew up in the same neighborhood where she ended up living in a senior apartment building called the Fricano Towers. And on August 8th of last year, she was shot and killed right outside her apartment in the hallway there at 90 Nelson Street. And so, yeah, tonight actually we'll be gathering there. It's 9 months ago today. And believe it or not, the Attorney General still has not named the killer cop. I've named the killer cop. It's Josue Plaza. He should have never been a police officer. He really was not cut out for the work, and frankly had already gotten in some major discipline for off-duty behavior that was inappropriate. And yeah, they gave him back the badge, they gave him back the gun, and he took a life. And I believe it was a crime. I'm pressing for transparency and justice, and so working with family members, on that particular day, I learned from her brother, who's a friend of mine, and just a real tragedy. And we want to be there to support the family. So it's not a campaign event or anything, but we are going to be out there tonight.
All right. Now, as we wrap up, this ties into, I have two quick questions.
Sure.
I believe, I do want to be clear, I think we're running a couple minutes late. I just want you to be aware of that.
Okay.
And now, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, tell me about Charles Kratovil versus City of New Brunswick and Anthony A. Caputo.
Okay.
You can make it quick, but this ties into that same issue.
So yeah, Director Anthony Caputo led the police department not once but twice. He retired and then he came out of retirement, so that created a situation where he could collect his pension and a salary, and he continued to lead the police department in a very non-transparent way. So non-transparent that he basically sold his house in New Brunswick. He moved into an apartment for a little while, but then eventually he left the city altogether and began residing and voting in Cape May City. Cape May is a resort community more than 2 hours outside of New Brunswick, and this was during the pandemic.
With traffic, it could take 3 or 4 hours some days. Sure. And it's at least, I think it's 2.5 to 3 hours from even here on a good day. Yeah, it's far.
It's a long drive, and basically him and to some extent his deputy director were spending their time in Cape May, and this was during a really bad crime wave where we had a lot of gun violence, we had a mass shooting, and he was pretty much checked out, remote controlling the police department from, a much safer community, and not on scene when these things were happening. And so it was a real, slap in the face to the residents who had to deal with sort of the aftermath of this. And, he was very, unaccessible. I would catch up with him once in a while, try to ask questions, and he would refuse. And, I was offended by this, and I brought it up to our city council one day, gave them the proof that he had registered to vote at an address in Cape May, and everybody flipped out because they thought it was wrong for me to reveal his address. Now, I didn't say it fully out loud at the meeting. I said the street name. I didn't say the house number, but I did give the council a piece of paper, the city council, his bosses, a piece of paper that had the address on it. And they thought this was wrong and illegal, and he sent me a threatening letter. One thing led to another. The ACLU represented me, and we sued. Unfortunately, we ended up losing the lawsuit. We went all the way to the state Supreme Court. There's this new law called Daniel's Law that's well-intentioned, but a real hindrance on free speech and freedom of the press. And, we did our best to fight the case, but the good news is the lawsuit basically forced him to retire, and he bounced, finally, left, and now works for Cape May County. So don't worry about his income. He's still getting a public paycheck, but he's no longer leading our police department. And I'm glad that that's the case, because he was definitely not giving it his all.
Just quickly, what do you think about the Open Public Records Act, also known as OPRA, why it's important, and do you think the 2024 change under Governor Murphy with support from both parties to varying degrees was a good or a bad thing? And how does it impact, people in New Brunswick or perhaps Matawan, Cherry Hill, Hazlitt, Hoboken, or anywhere else in New Jersey? Why is it important? Yeah. And what do you think, was it the right or wrong decision to change that law?
Yeah, I was very against those changes in 2024. In fact, I spoke up and I warned specifically about the provision where it would enable local governments to sue their own residents if they feel they're filing too many requests. And we've seen that happen now in Matawan, in the Cherry Hill Board of Education case. And it's something that's very troubling because for a long time, we've counted on our rights to access public records as really fundamental ways that we can keep government transparent, that we can, hold them accountable, find out what they're spending on, find out what they're putting in writing, find out, what their plans are or what their deliberations are. And at the end of the day, governments have been chipping away at it for many years because they don't like the transparency. They don't like us being able to get a glimpse at their emails or, their databases, or one really important one, police videos, right? So we're seeing more and more redactions and, less and less information being released. It's much more often that they'll tell you, oh, we need more time, or we need you to write us a check for $500 so that we can do the redactions and give you this stuff. So, there's many ways that Oprah is being rolled back or chipped away at. Unfortunately, Governor Murphy signed that bill, and it was one of the worst things he did as governor. And, it's having a negative impact on transparency as a result. But we persevere and continue to advocate for more transparency and come up with creative ways to get that transparency. Oprah's not the only way. There's a federal law called FOIA. There's also the common law right of access. But, Oprah, is unfortunately not what it used to be, and we need to fight for it.
Absolutely. And last I checked, 80% of the public was against the changes to Oprah. Yeah. And just for the listening public, FOIA was found by Ralph Nader and the Raider Naders, the volunteers in college that helped Ralph Nader achieve these things, also known as the Freedom of Information Act. Yes. I state this to say that it's one of the most important pieces of law to ever exist. And if Oprah is under attack, it wouldn't be a surprise if people started coming at the federal level, which would impact people at every level of government all across the nation. I will let you go, but I have one more very important question. And this is localized. This is for the people of New Brunswick. Tell me about the budget meeting you attended the other day or evening for New Brunswick budget and what the public needs to know.
Good question. Yeah, no, we have a budget here for the city government that is unfortunately, just giving a pittance to the people who really need the most help and, really caters to developers. The big thing I would say, these long-term tax exemptions are giving developers a chance to, basically get out of paying millions of dollars that they would otherwise have to pay on their huge projects. And critically, it redirects where the funds go. So it does go into our city budget, 95% of it. And the city touts this as a big success, but it takes it away from our school system. So these often referred to as pilots, right? Payment in lieu of taxes. A lot of towns, they prove to be controversial because they do give the developers a discount. The discount doesn't necessarily come from the municipal budget. It comes from the schools because they redirect where the funds go. Typically in New Brunswick, about 40% of your tax dollars would go to the school system. But if you get a long-term tax exemption, you don't have to pay any school taxes. 95% goes to the city, 5% goes to the county, and the savings for the developer largely comes at the expense of our schools. So I think that's wrong, and you won't catch me approving any long-term tax exemption that doesn't include something for our school system, because I think that the children are the future, and it's a mistake to not insist that we have developers pay their fair share into that system.
Okay, how did it feel to have Sagar and Jetty of Breaking Points end his interview saying some people call you the enemy, he paraphrased, but meant enemy of the people. I consider you a hero of the people. Considering Sagar and Jetty is kind and graceful even when he doesn't agree with somebody, but he very rarely gives compliments like that. So how did that make you feel?
It was quite a day. I mean, I was just really, kind of like flattered that I was even invited to be on Breaking Points as somebody who's watched that program since it came on, and watched them before they even did Breaking Points
with the Hill.
On the Hill.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool to just be a part of it, and I was not expecting it to be such a favorable interview. I knew they'd probably be supportive and thought it was cool what I did, but yeah, he was very, very kind, and I thought it was excellent. I'm glad that I got to be a part of it.
As a final word to the people of New Brunswick, what would you? And I should add, you know what? No, hold on. I redact that. As a final word to the people of New Brunswick first, what would you like to say? Why should they support you? And remind them again when they can vote.
You got it, John. So, to the people of New Brunswick, we have a chance to make a big change here on June 2nd. I'm encouraging you to vote for me, Charlie Kratovil, to be your next mayor. I'll be the first new mayor in 36 years. And I also hope you'll support Yenny Mendez-Romero. As a team, we will work to make it more affordable, safer, and have a transparent government so everybody knows what's going on for a change. We'll actually listen to people, we'll be accessible, and we'll make big changes that'll make our transportation system better, that will prioritize meeting people's basic needs like housing, like food, like medical care, and we'll leverage relationships with places like Rutgers University and the big institutions in our city to deliver for you, because right now the priority is corporate power, and that's not serving us. We need somebody who's going to put the people first, and I'm ready to serve you, and I hope you'll vote for me in the Democratic primary on June 2nd.
Okay, and again, remind the people the last day to register because it's coming soon.
May 12th, coming up. If you're not registered, get registered, and please do participate in the Democratic primary.
Now, I have to say this, since you guys are cross-endorsing and since I had the privilege of already interviewing John Shue for Congress in the 6th District, which represents different areas of Middlesex as well as Monmouth County, vital places in both of those counties. Why do you think people should vote for John Shue for Congress?
Oh, John's the man to serve us. We've similar dynamic. We've had the same leadership representing us in Congress for too long. We need somebody who's going to put the people first, and John's the man to do that. He's really working very hard to get the word out, and I hope that you'll give him your vote too.
Yeah, Frank Pallone Jr., it's very close. Something like 92 or 93, I believe. He came into
power.
He
became a congressman in I want to say 88, but I'm late for my next interview, so I've got to run.
Thank you for taking the time, Charlie.
My pleasure,
John. Is there anything people could do to volunteer or help out the campaign?
Yes, I encourage them to go to powertothepeoplenb.com.
Fantastic. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, John.